especially as you're changing, evolving, changing programming or stepping beyond trauma. So like when you're on the up and up and you're, connecting with your higher self, like let's say you have a trauma that's like right here and you're like living, and it's like as you start to go up, the trauma follows you.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been the craziest thing to me, is like you think you're beyond it. You think you're like out of the woods and you don't believe that anymore. And that's not alive for you anymore. And then you like come back around. But when you step into it, you're like, oh, now I have to process the trauma as the lone wolf. Now I have to process the trauma as the husband. Now I have to process the trauma as the father. And
Yeah.
it's like
Yep.
this, like, so this, like, the journey is never really over. I think like the judgment that comes in when you fall off the wagon, or we have to remember that like this is a journey and it's not going to be perfect, but it's sort of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is the way of the world.
Yeah.
And realizing that every time you go through it, seemingly from my experience, like there's a different lesson or a different layer to shed.
This next podcast is with my dear friend, Joseph Anew. Joseph is a health, fitness, and nutrition expert. He has put me through some of my absolute favorite workouts. He and his wife, Amelia, run an event called Runga Life that is one of Jason and my favorite events that we go to every year. Joseph has undergone immense personal transformation, especially since the birth of his son. And in this podcast, we talk about the reality of what that looks like. We talk about how certain events in our lives will literally create a fork in the road where we can choose which path that we want to take. These things that happen for us, not to us, set us on a trajectory that have the power to change our lives. We also talk about the reality of what growth and change can look like as far as the relationships around you evolving. Go ahead, grab your beverage, grab a friend, get a cozy spot, and listen in. Enjoy. Okay, welcome, Joseph Anew. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Melissa. Excited to be here, and I think we'll share a lot of fun, hopefully wise information here in the next hour or so.
Absolutely. I know we will. And there's so many things I want to talk about. And so I think we just start from the beginning. I just want to briefly touch on how we met and then start with your story.
Yeah, sounds great.
I actually was introduced to you and Amelia, who at the time, I believe you guys weren't married yet, at Paleo FX. So we were there, we were providing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And those of you that don't know Paleo FX, this was a conference for a lot of health enthusiasts that are into clean eating, some basic to pretty hardcore biohacking technologies, just an incredible large conference, great place to meet your tribe, meet your community, and really network with a lot of like-minded people. And we met you, I think, one of the last days there, and just knew from then on that we just wanted to be connected with you and Amelia.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, and you know what is so funny actually about this is both. And by the way, Paleo Effects, may it rest in peace. Like I'm pretty sure it's gone. Both Amelia and I both had a dream last night that we basically took Runga and made it into a massive event like that. And it might happen. Like we might. So we love the Runga gathering, which you've been a part of for the last bunch of years. We're going to continue to do that. But why did we both have this dream? And I think there's a need. And I can just imagine, as you mentioned, I used to, a funny story about Spartan, because in the beginning, no one knew it was going to do that. Like no one, like 30 some odd countries around the world, millions of global participants, humongous sponsors. And literally, over 10 years ago, like, do you think people will really like throw spears and like crawl under barbed wire in the deep mud? And it was just this crazy kind of idea. Well, what was funny about it was we began to really put a lot, and we do this at Runga as well, as you know, we invested heavily in photography. And, 10, 12 years ago, Facebook was not new, but it was also just kind of in its infancy.
Mm-hmm.
And like overnight, like millions of people had these photos of them that were like, throwing spears and
Badass.
doing
Yeah.
all this really
Yeah.
badass stuff.
All the things you want to show your friends.
And that was really what grew kind of the brand. And what was funny about it is very quickly we grew to like 5 million Facebook followers.
Wow.
And
And
somewhere,
wait, can we just backstep a little bit for people that don't know Spartan? I mean, I feel like
yeah,
everybody does at
yeah.
this point, but what is the Spartan races? Just so we're clear.
Yeah. So, well, it started as a 5K and now there's all sorts of different distances. You can escalate, you can kind of rise up. You can go from a short race to a longer race to an even longer race to a 24-hour race if you want to. And the idea in the beginning, Joe DeSena had was to create, well, in the beginning, it was kind of the opposite of your traditional endurance event. So, endurance events, there's a reason why, CEOs and type A professionals gravitate to Ironman and, even marathon running because it's very 1+1 = 2 training. It's like, I'm going to build up every week. I'm going to add a couple of miles and I know for sure I'm going to be ready because the distance is 26.2 and, I'm going to build up. And there's this math equation and you have like your electrolytes on your right side and your water on your left side. And every half hour you drink this one and every 45 you drink this one. And there's this like math equation to success. And myself and Joe DeSena were alike in this. We were both sick of that. Like, this isn't real. This is kind of like hacking, but it's a little bit like, and we can talk about like the birth of my son and you have kids. Like, childbirth is this natural, amazing thing, and it's life altering for everyone that's involved, both men and women. But it's not, it's one of the few things left in this world that we live in today that's truly natural, that's truly unpredictable, that's
Yeah.
truly something amazing how Mother Nature intended. And so we wanted to bring people back to that and
Mm-hmm.
create something that was not 1+1 = 2. And so that was kind of the impetus. And so, and in the beginning it was really kind of funny, but yeah, I guess back to sort of, yeah. So, if you imagine like a 5K that maybe you would do on Thanksgiving morning,
Mm-hmm.
now imagine that it's like up and down a ski mountain twice. And, along the way, you're literally crawling under barbed wire, throwing spears, and you have no idea what's around the corner. And that was very exciting for people because I think people that were running 5Ks were kind of doing it for the caloric expenditure and maybe the running shoes, but not really like they weren't like off their phone. They were like, you weren't really kind of stepping away from the matrix. You weren't really stepping out of your sort of cognitive games you play or the cognitive dream you're in. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're present, there was this amazing presence that I think came from it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why it spread like wildfire. But to kind of tie a bow on this, we exploded to 5 million Facebook fans. And I started posting on Facebook, like, I'm going to be at Santa Monica Pier doing a workout and I've got a trunk full of free t-shirts to anybody that's going to, that wants to like do some burpees and like run on the beach. And it grew. At one point we had 1,100 people show up
Oh my God.
and
With you,
like with
with one
me.
coach.
Yeah. So I developed this like grid system where I would put people in lines and rows and then I could just with a microphone be like, 3, 2, 1, go, do burpees, do push-ups, do squats.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dream that I had last night is like, imagine 1,000 people meditating. Imagine
Mm-hmm.
like that same grid um, committed to, rather than, getting sweaty and sore,
Mm-hmm.
awakening or becoming alive or feeling into gratitude and love. And so this vision that for whatever reason both of us had last night,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
pretty intense. There's something there.
yeah. So
And what you're talking about, I think, perhaps it's just my lens because it's what I want and it's what I'm creating on this platform, but I really feel that that's what people want right now.
yeah,
People want to dabble in some of the other things, some of the uncertainty, some of the things that were maybe considered woo woo, these things that we're watching and seeing leaders and entrepreneurs and people doing big things are doing more of these things. They're incorporating meditation and sound healing and breath work and ice bath. Like, these things do something. They move the needle in a way that the other stuff that we've all been doing, grinding, working out, watching our heart rate, that those just don't touch. So whatever you guys are onto, it's big. And the fact that both of you had that is just, I can't wait to see what that turns into. So
yeah,
Joseph and Amelia run an event called Runga, which I touched on earlier. Runga is, if you have it in you to attend, right now it's twice a year. I know that model might change. It is one of the best events that we have ever attended. I come back such a better version of myself. So it's,
Sweet.
you know, we go there and we bring the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but you basically show up to this beautiful property, which right now is in Austin, Texas. And I think the Dixie Chicks used to record there, if I'm not mistaken.
They used to own the house, yeah. And now my friend Rod does, and we borrow it from him from time to time.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful property, surrounded by some of the best food I've ever had in my life. Super clean, every meal. I mean, I eat so much that weekend, and I actually come home and I'm like super fit. It's some of the cleanest food ever. I don't feel like I splurged by any means. And then throughout each of the days, it's like almost like choose your own adventure. So you're having breakfast with like-minded people. There's some pretty high-end health influencers there. Ben Greenfield always comes with his family. And it's a really intimate setting. And then you pick from like, okay, do you want to do yoga? Do you want to do sound bowl healing? Do you want to go do hyperbaric oxygen therapy? Do you want to try an ice bath and someone's walking you through the ice bath? Do you want to go make sourdough bread with Amelia and Jessa Greenfield, which by the way, I'm like literally making mine right now, is mixing the ingredients before I came. But this community that you guys have created, and I know you're thinking about what's the next level for it, is just something that I really encourage everyone to do something like this. You know, forget work, put away your phone. Like you guys really encourage people to get off the phones. Forget about all your responsibilities for 2.5 days. Anyone can do that, and check out so that you can check in. And the people, the relationships that we've created at your events are lifelong friendships. So I'm so grateful for what you're doing.
Well, you hit. Oh, gosh, thank you, Melissa. That was beautiful. I've got nothing to add. You know what's interesting is like we're in this time of there's like a lot of reinvention happening.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was watching football on Amazon the other night, right? Like, and I was only watching it, well, because Tom Brady was on, but still I was watching it because I was in awe. They just reinvented. So like TV, I don't know, we don't have a TV. We haven't had a TV in years, but it's like, so sports, live sports are now on this different platform. Like for all I know, you know, I don't, TVs might be out of business. I don't know what's happening
Yeah.
over there, but
Yeah.
I find it so interesting that like Amazon came in and obviously Netflix too. And, you know, but suddenly live sports on this streaming platform. Cause I remember when Netflix started, I was a customer, it was like $7, I think, but you actually got DVDs in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had to send them back, and you know there's all this drama, and then eventually like you know you like it went online, and now they're doing live sports. Why I'm saying this is like we're in this time of reinvention and everything needs to be reinvented. And my frustration, essentially what you just described, which was completely perfect and I've got nothing to add. Runga is this like it's not a retreat, but it's not a convention, but it's like a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very intimate small group. And so if we kind of combine that with this like this period of reinvention that we're in and live sports on Netflix, and this dream we had last night, we might just need to reinvent the convention. So like conventions where we met, where my wife and I met, where so many of my friendships lifelong, as you said, began, but they kind of like they're fun, but they kind of there's a lot that like I would like to see changed. And so the idea was like, you know, what happens when we create an event for 50 people and they're like the coolest, best 50 from an event that might have 1,000 people at it, or 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000.
Mm-hmm.
But combining that with the dream, what does it look like to have 1,000 people meditating and then 1,000 people going and get the bread making workshop and the, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
if we act on that dream, now I see it. It's like the reinvention of the convention. There's like, it's not just buying a ticket. There's some way in. There's some like quantification, qualification. So anyways, I like this notion of like this time we're in right now, even you know, you're creating this brand new platform for health conscious moms to really, you know, just become informed and enlightened and inspired. And
Mm-hmm.
you're reinventing how mothers get information,
Yeah.
and you're giving them an alternative platform to get that information. So anyways, I'm just curious what the future is going to bring, because we've kind of got this thing nailed down in the small group setting, but
Mm-hmm.
dreaming big and chasing impact might bring some other dream into reality.
Yeah.
probably in concert with what we've got going now.
Well, and anything you guys do, everything you touch is beautiful. The two of you together, just incredible. So I can't say it enough. I'm so excited to see what that turns into. And then piggybacking off that, let's talk about reinvention, because you've done some reinventing over the last, I mean, couple years that I've witnessed, and I'm sure it began even before then. So maybe we start with, I know you have a traumatic brain injury in your history.
Yeah.
So that partially brought us together, because I know you were using hyperbaric oxygen therapy, one of our favorite modalities in one of our companies. So let's start there. Tell me what happened. I don't even know how you sustained this brain injury.
Yeah. So it was, and it's so, at some point we'll do a part 2.
Okay.
Because this story is just, there's no way we're going to touch it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I was younger, I had this freak accident where essentially something fell on me and fractured my skull, plate in my head, surgery to fish out fragments of my brain, or fragments of my skull from my brain, cerebral spinal fluid all over me. Not that I remember, because I was out like a light. But from that too, like there's just, and by the way, this was like, it's almost comical, like looking with what I know now, back then at like the treatment I received, like the definition of done, like the definition of fine, the definition of healthy, the definition of capable. And so long story short, like, there was all of this trauma, all of this injury, all of this confusion. And it's like, oh, well, he knows his name. So like,
Yeah. The bar is typically set pretty low. If you're not sick and ailing, you're fine and you're done as far as the medical system.
Right. Absolutely.
How old were you when
I
that
was like 11 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I was young.
Pretty important time for brain development too.
Yeah. And it was just so crazy. And I like, there was like the physical, and then there was like all of the unresolved spiritual, emotional, human elements that were like completely brushed under the rug. Like, just like that definition, it's like sick care. Right. So what happened, inevitably, and it was interesting too, because there was a lot, and maybe I'll share this. I don't usually go into this, but this platform that we're on right now is really about being amazing parents and amazing moms. And I'm also not taking anything away from my parents, because like they were doing the best with what they had. Like we were also eating 6 to 11 servings of bread a day, and like following the food pyramid. Like we were doing the thing, and trusting docs. And but it was crazy how, like, even when I was consciously aware of what was going on at such a young age, I didn't think anyone really believed in me. Like I didn't think my parents, I felt like my parents just gave up on me. Like he's just a vegetable now. Like this is too much. Like they didn't have the well. They didn't have the well that I needed. And so I became my own well. Like, and I've said, not really to anybody but my wife, but like in that way, and sorry, Ma, but like, I felt like I was my own mom and dad from that moment forward. I felt like, so when I came out of anesthesia, I remember I was in the ICU and I woke up and kind of had no idea what was going on. But the first thing I said was, my name is Joseph Stefano. I live at 86 South Harbor Road, Townsend. My phone number is 978-597. I was just trying to rifle off proof that like I'm okay, because like heading in, I was like, you people don't think I'm gonna like. And by the way, we won't get into it, but by that time, like I had already been through a lot. Like, like this was nothing. Like as far as I was concerned, like I was no newbie to the emergency room or anything like that.
Yeah,
so
it
was
sounds
just
like you were a fighter at 11 years old to come out of anesthesia like that. Like there's something in you that it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And then when we look at the sort of belief systems and things that were created in that moment, trusting that the world is a friendly place, believing that, I'm supported, believing that. So I developed this kind of like lone wolf mentality, which, we can get to, but like I've been trying to shed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of it, is like, thinking like, no one's got my back. The world doesn't, I gotta fight. I gotta do this. And what's interesting is, it was really took about 10 years after the injury for things to just get like undeniably bad in terms of my physical, like couldn't walk in a straight line.
Wow.
Like I was just like, my alignment was completely off, because my neck is, even to this day, it's why I don't run anymore, because like my neck just goes bananas. And I've got a lot of like, even I think from my fascial system, I've kind of investigated a lot of different things, but even on the fascial side, because
Mm-hmm.
I have such a huge scar on my head that you can see if I shave my head, and like they just like started grabbing skin and tightening me up. Well,
Which
that creates
we know affects so much in your body. The anatomy trains and that pulls from everywhere. Yeah.
pulls from everywhere. So like that, I've had that worked on a million times. And so there's this, there's so much there. So about 10 years after the fact, like my mind was like not where it needed to be. My spirit was not where it needed to be. My physical wasn't where it needed to be. The wheels really started to come off. And that's when my health journey switched. Well, really, because I was already coaching and training people. I started coaching and training people when I don't even know if I was 18.
Wow.
And so by my early 20s, I went from fitness to a walking program. And then when Spartan came around, it was this like life preserver. It was just this like spirit thing. And we can get into this as well, but like if you have mind, body, spirit, sometimes like, well, we all need work in all three,
Yeah.
right? Like what do we do for our spiritual? What do we do for our mental, emotional? What do we do for our physical?
Mm-hmm.
But like if you're kind of in the pits, like going all in on one of them can lift all boats, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for me, like feeling down physically because I couldn't really work out, down emotionally, down spiritually, feeling like that lone wolf mentality. And then Spartan race, all of a sudden I jump into this 5K and I'm throwing a spear. I feel alive. I feel amazing. I'm out of my head. I'm into my body. And
Mm-hmm.
the physical overflowed, and it started changing my mind. It started changing my body. It started changing my spirit. And what happened was I went so all in, as I do. I went so all in, like just ridiculous. And then by like 2014, 2015, which is when we started Runga, like it had run amok. It had gone too far. And so then
Mm-hmm.
I was so yang, I needed to like find the yin. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll start creating I'll create a yoga retreat. We'll like do a bunch of meditation and mindfulness and eat. At the time we ate plants, and so I'd eat steak all year and then have this break where we eat plants. And so that was kind of the beginning. And those two things coexisted. So I had my yin and yang. And then in 2018, I left Spartan, went all in on Runga, and here we are. So
Love
yeah.
it. So much there. And I don't feel like you're doing any disservice to your parents. And thank you for sharing that story. I know you haven't shared that with a lot of people. I imagine you feel the same way. Like those are things that happen to us, but they really happen for us. Like, do you feel that without you feeling like a lone wolf, without you feeling like it was all on you, without you feeling like you didn't have the support, would you be where you are today? Would you work so hard to have created all the things that you're creating?
Now, try not to cry here, Melissa. So, I wouldn't change a thing about my life. And I learned that this is happening for us. There's no accidents. There's no coincidences. You can go as deep as you want into this, but like we ultimately choose our path.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll press pause there and just say, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm grateful for it all. Basically, even HBOT, like the engine behind everything that I've done
Mm-hmm.
has been to heal myself, to use myself as a bit of a, lab test dummy or a guinea pig, and take the best of the best and dish that to others.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at Runga as an example and go back to your beautiful description, yeah, the food is ridiculously way higher quality than anybody in my position would invest in, because I can get grass-fed beef and organic vegetables for 10 cents, or I can get them for $10. But I'm worth it. My
Mm-hmm.
family's worth it. You're worth it. And so when you look at Runga, from the food quality, the supplements we serve, the partners we bring on, they're the best of the best of like a 20-year journey. and they're the people that have had the biggest impact on me, and the modalities that have had the biggest impact. So when you look at Runga, it's an amazing, if you had a concussion on Wednesday and attended Runga Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you would just be amazing.
You'd
Like
be good
you,
to go. Mm-hmm.
you'd be good.
I remember you
Um,
too at one point, one of the, like, I call them family dinners that you host there, because it feels like family dinner when we all sit down, we get at the long table or the circular tables, and you were kind of cheersing the meal, and you said, you guys are worth it. Like, you're worth it. And I mean, that could make me tear up. Like, we're all worth it. And to have that food and to sit in this experience because you know that you're worth it is so powerful.
and it's actually everything. So even this relationship we're in this moment, like there's me, there's you, and there's the relationship, right? So of course I'm worth it, because I'm gonna, like, everyone's a mirror. Every interaction we have, we're projecting and we're seeing ourselves in others. So there's almost this, we can look at it from both sides. Like, we're worth it. We should do this. We should invest here, and we should put time into this. But it's also kind of our responsibility, if we're going to move the needle for the planet, the community, the social structure, whatever. It's also our responsibility, because we are contributing to the whole.
Absolutely. Every person you interact with. Absolutely. There's so my first episode 1, is with a really good friend, Annie. You have got to meet her. You would adore her. And it's interesting because, just, touching on children, Leon Thor, your incredible son. So Annie says this, she has this really neat way of looking at things, and, just going back to your story, and I would call that a traumatic event. And we talk a lot about trauma. I know you and I have worked on our traumas. We all have trauma. It's just an experience that we go through that we feel perceived lack of control. And, when it comes time to our children, it's like, I don't know about you, but in my mind, I'm like, let me prevent all their traumas. Let me shelter them. And we can't. And, what she says is, if we try to protect them from their traumas, it blocks them from their story. And in my mind, what you just shared, that's your story. You wouldn't be who you are without that story. And look at all the people that you're impacting thanks to your story.
Right.
And part of what I want people to get out of any of these episodes, or, especially this one, is, again, these things happen for us. These are our stories. And the people that I now surround myself with, and I know you do too, we talk about our stories. And we elevate each other through our stories, and we share resources. Like, here's someone that I'm working with, Joseph. Who are you working with? I love this guy because blah, blah, blah. Like, these are the things that truly, to your point, will impact the world.
Completely agree. And every trauma, and we can talk about parenting if you want. Every trauma is actually like a fork in the road. So when I was in my early 20s, I had a white coat doc tell me I would be Michael J. Fox by 30. And he said, Muhammad Ali got hit in the head too many times. Michael J. Fox has bad luck. It's both brain stuff. And, you got hit in the head pretty hard, and there's not a lot that you're going to be able to do. And it was diagnosed as dystonia, because I had this like bizarre right-sided tension. But why I say every trauma is a fork in the road is because if I wasn't who I am, and if at that time I wasn't the lone wolf, I guarantee you I would have been Michael J. Fox by 30. I could have identified with the trauma, became the advocate for dystonia, been the poster child, and identified with this thing. Or I could say, no, like, no way, Jose. And that was after some reflection. And actually, the funny thing, if I tell you the story, at that moment, I said, F it. I don't know if we could swear on here, but like, I just said F it. At the time, I was in my early 20s, and I already had like a 6-figure coaching practice, personal training. And I just said, well, if I've got like basically 7 years to live the way I want, like, I'm out. And so I went down to the Caribbean, and I stayed there. So I actually went for a quote week with my brother. And then on the last day, I was like, hey, I got bad news, bro. I'm not going home. I'm sticking around.
Stayed. Good for you.
And, but when you look at what happened, speaking of our story, like that was my story. And what happened? I got into free diving, which I just was on your Instagram, and I saw you.
I didn't know that. I'm getting into it. Yeah.
started getting crazy about like holding my breath. Like, how long can I sit underwater? How long I would like do what I did as a 2-year-old, and like not a 2-year-old, but maybe a 8-year-old. And like, I'm going to have a tea party at the bottom of the ocean. And like,
Yes.
how
Very
long can I hold
powerful
my
stuff.
breath? Yeah.
Very powerful.
Started getting super into Tony Robbins, did Personal Power 2 on the beach, like every single day. Just when I got to day 30, I'd start back at day 1. Just,
Mhm.
and when you look at like even Runga, it's all crap I developed unknowingly, like quote breath work. Like, oh, it started as just breath holds and
Yeah.
apnea tables so that I could free dive. Um,
Mhm.
so when you look at like our story, it's like, holy smokes, like I picked up all this quote biohacking, even grounding on the beach. And I unknowingly, when I look now, my good friend Eric Remensberger, who passed away a couple of years ago, his anti-cancer treatment is basically what I did just because I was tired of the world and a little bit depressed in that time in the Caribbean, which has basically created the infrastructure and the backbone of almost all the biohacking stuff, even that we do at Runga. So
And
it's
it's just living. It's literally just taking the time to live. Like if we all just pause and stop all the shit, we can swear on here because he'll beep it out. And sometimes it's appropriate.
yeah.
Like just stop all the shit, stop all the movement. Just
Mhm.
stop and quiet, whether it's inner child work or just taking a minute connecting with God. Like, what is it that you really want? Your body will tell you. Your body will get you outside. Your body will get you in sunlight. Your body will get you to put on music. Your body will get you to the ocean. Like, we know what we need. We've just forgotten how to listen. And all we're doing at Runga, I mean, not to simplify it, but we're living, we're connecting, we have an incredible community, and we're living life.
I think that's so beautiful. And I think um, there's this, and I love the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And it's like, for me, like my physical, how my neck feels, particularly how my right side feels, has literally been the thing. Does it work or does it not work? Well, if it
Mhm.
works, like my neck doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
If it works, my neck doesn't pop the next day. If it
Yeah.
works, and so and how do I feel? Like, can I rotate all the way this way and this way? So like
Mhm.
your body too, and this gets into a lot of even the emotional and spiritual, like even a lot of the things I've shared, my body has told me that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to what your doctor told you, I had a similar experience, and I have to tell every single person listening to this, if a doctor tells you or your kid you can't, fire that doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I was told at the age of 14, 15 that I would need a hip replacement. By the time I was 30, if I kid could get pregnant, I'd have awful childbirths. I would never be able to run. I did the same thing. I took the fork in the road. I
Yeah.
said, screw you. I went on to not only run, I ran marathons and did an Ironman just so I could say in my head, you were wrong. I had 3 beautiful natural births, 2 of them in our home. Like, don't let these people tell you that your body is designed to fail. Our bodies are designed to thrive. And absolutely, your body will tell you if what you're doing is right or not. If your body hurts, it's not because you have bad knees. It's not because you hit the age of 40. It shouldn't hurt. You shouldn't be tired. You shouldn't feel like shit. Like, you should feel good. If you're not thriving, then there's something that you're not doing, you're deficient in, and you just got to find it, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, mind, body, spirit. And again, if you just quiet down, I would imagine you agree with this. Like you'll be pulled to what it is that you need, right?
Absolutely. It's wild. And that's sort of the thing that you gotta like, your success depends on your ability to like see the forest through the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you get slapped in the head with this book, there's a reason for that. And so
Yes.
when you start to listen, like even you, like who's trickling into your life, HBot really connected with Melissa and Jason. HBot, that's probably something that would be good for me.
Mm-hmm.
So we connected on a personal level. Like, I really like this person. They elevate me. They make me feel better about myself. And, it just feels like a healthy relationship that could last a long time. Oh, and HBot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah. So
probably supposed to do HBot.
right. And that's so true. Like it can be that easy. These things will literally come into your life, but you won't notice unless you're listening and pay attention. So this is why I would ask you, because I think especially moms and a lot of my listeners are just in that loop and that spiral where we're like going from this thing to that thing to this thing. So what do you feel like are the things that have helped you, because I know you're super busy, have helped you really pause and be present and incorporate that into your daily life?
Well, for me, there's so committing to like, what do I really want to be? When Leon, my son, was born, like I would have said before he was born, yeah, like I do all the things. Like, oh, I listen to my soul, I connect, I'm committed, I follow through. He's born, and there was like another like 6 levels maybe deep I could go into all of those commitments and agreements and words. Right. So for me, this ambition to be the best possible father to this little boy and make sure he has not a trauma-free life, of course, but I want to give him just every opportunity and treat him with the utmost respect and stay out of his way, right? Like there's a certain beauty in these children. And when I started to see the father that I wanted to be and the father I was, so like what was my body or my gut telling me to do in this parenting moment, and what do I know to be true as the right thing to do? Because when a child is born and like it's the first year of life or first 6 months or something, like you're underslept, you're tired, there's like all these excuses. In my case, it was May 2020 when he was born. So it's
wow.
we were basically stranded in a foreign country and just had a baby. So it's like this incredibly stressful situation going on. And so there was this connection from the second, even before he was born, of chasing that sort of like heartfelt desire or this heartfelt commitment. And what that did to me was bring up a lot of wounding. So why do I want to be upset with my wife? Why do I want to turn over and go to sleep? And it started to create a scenario where I was not hyper analyzing, but I was aware that I had flaws in programming. And so what do I need to do to change those flaws in programming? What's the structure beneath those flaws in programming, and how can I change that structure? And that was sort of like this past 3 years. Of course, people might be wondering if they like, I don't know what was in the show notes, but like changed my name because and I stepped back into my full potential, my full name. So I was Joe for a long time, and I'm going back to Joseph. And there's a lot of reasons there, but the biggest one is it's the name that was given to me, and it was the person I was supposed to be. And so, hell, let's step back in. And then changing my last name has to do with this reprogramming, because if, and I'm not saying everyone should go out and change their name, but I think like there's a certain power to it. There's a certain power, there's a reason, after 3 years in yoga, my wife was given a name.
What was she given?
So she was given the name Priya Shanti by our yogi, because I mean, we were big into Kundalini yoga for many years, but she basically had like 5 or 6 years before my first class. And then we did a couple more years. And so she was given a spiritual name, Priya Shanti. And when we look at like, my wife was, she'll be on this podcast and she can talk about her own story, but like there's Amelia and there's Priya now. And part of this is really interesting. Like that's a different vibrational frequency. And what's funny about it is, and part of the sort of impetus, I suspect, that led me to change my name, and it's a small piece of it, but it's still relevant, because at Spartan, Joe DeSena was the guy with the vision and the money. And then like I was this guy that was like really close to Joe, but I was Joe DeStefano, and it was super confusing. And like even like years later, I'd be on a podcast and like, it's the founder of the Spartan. So I became Joe DI.
Coach Joe DI. Yep.
Coach Joe DI. Coach Joe DI. So it was a half of my first name and like a fifth of my last name, and it was crammed up, and that was like my identity.
Yeah, it's an identity, isn't a name, for sure.
And it was so weird when I identified that, like, because then when I did a TED Talk on HRV, I think in 2015, and I was tempted to be Joseph then, because it was like, because this wasn't the Spartan race, because all I did at Spartan race was teach people how to do monkey bars basically for 10 years, whether you were a professional or a couch potato. And so when I did the TED Talk, I kind of identified, whoa, like I'm going to go back. I want to go back. I don't want to be Joe DI on the TED stage. And so I identified this. And so as we look at my name now, it's a complete shift in vibrational frequency to be Joseph Anew as opposed to Joe DeStefano.
Yeah. And I think some people may not understand that. So like Jason, my husband, who you
Yeah.
know very well, you guys are very close, is Jason. It's pretty much
Mhm.
always Jason. In some circles, he's Jay, but it's the letter J, not Jay. So like there's intention and identity there, even though he doesn't necessarily realize it. But for me, okay, growing up, I was Missy. I was Missy Mouse. I was Mel. I was Issa. I was Lissa. So, like, literally in different circles of people, I have a different name. And it is an identity thing. And so, when it came time to our children, it was so important for me that they had, because of what I experienced with almost like mixed identity, I was like, no, our kids have these short names: Levi, Wyatt, Kaya. It's literally because of that. And so
Mhm.
I think anyone who has nicknames or different names in different circles, and I'm thankful for it. I like it. I hear Missy and I'm like, oh my gosh, someone who's known me since I was a kid is around. It's kind of cool and endearing. But I mean, you changing your name, I know, has been a powerful shift. I've seen a change in you. So let's talk about some of the other stuff you've done since Leon was born, and you kind of, it's like he cracked you open.
It did. It did. And it's, it's when we truly commit to something, there's only one path. And it's funny too, because the second year of Runga, I made a t-shirt and it was, there's only one trail. Like that's what the back of the shirt said.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because I didn't even really know at the time. And here's the thing about Runga is just like, it's always been like this like energetic thing that's like inexplicable and very much has a life of its own. And like things make sense like 5 years later, but there's only one trail, there's only one path. And I think like commitment is something, and surrender is ultimately what I did. And maybe surrender would be a better word. So
Hmm.
like I can surrender. I can be like, Melissa, I surrender. Like I'll buy an H bot. Or
Do it. It will help you heal.
like so there's like levels to that, right? So there's like the level of surrender to buy a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. There's the level of surrender to do it once a week. There's the level of surrender to do it 5 times a week. So in my life, like I wasn't using the term surrender then. I am now because it's taught me to be. I've learned that it's the most powerful thing. And so when you surrender to the voice within, the intuition, sometimes the instinct, just not the fears, when you surrender to those things and you start to act like, well, then more stuff starts to come in.
Yeah.
And there's this, well, wait a minute. When I make some change and everyone thinks I'm crazy, I have this thing like we all say, like, trust your gut and follow your heart. But then as soon as you do, people say you're out of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how come as people think I'm out of my mind, like literally my neck doesn't pop? I can move. My body feels whole.
Mm-hmm.
I feel better. I sleep better. I wake up better. I perform better. I can concentrate more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this like surrender leads to courage because you surrender and then everyone thinks you're out of your mind. And so then you have to put up the walls of courage and just say, like, dude, Joseph Anew is here.
It's so true. Change can be hard. And when we all go to change, there's people around us that might be uncomfortable with that. And whether conscious or subconscious, they're going to try to pull us back to what they know and remember. And we're supposed to change. It's okay. Do you find that as you have further stepped into what feels good in your body and what feels good in your heart, that the people that support that in you are showing up for you?
Yeah. And I would say that the people that are supportive of me are finding their way to me. And even this relationship is
Mm-hmm.
now deeper.
Yeah.
And people have left just as quick. And
Yeah.
there's probably for every one that comes in, there's probably two that left. Or maybe it's a more of a ranking hierarchical system where like someone that was really important to me is no longer here
Mm-hmm.
in the way they were, but someone that was like just an acquaintance or a friend is now like a freaking pal. Like
Yeah.
they're like, we're tight. And so you have to be okay with that. And that's where this conditioning comes in. And my friend Rod, who he's an amazing guy, he owns the property that we rent for Runga. He describes Runga as a significant emotional event for people.
Definitely
And
is.
so there's significant emotional events and they're all over the place. And there's a trauma is a significant emotional event. Getting married is a significant emotional event. And so then there's, and I'm not saying marriage is a trauma either.
No,
So
it's just
there's
a
like,
change. It's a big change.
I was just kidding.
Yeah.
But it's like, and then there's the conditioning. So there's like the significant emotional event, you're feeling amazing. I would never in a million years live any other way than I am in this moment. And then, like, the ego comes back online, the old self comes back online, and you start to fall again. It's like, well, that's where like you need some form of conditioning. And so when you step into surrender, and then you have to like be courageous, like being courageous is really tiring if you're not connected and if you don't have a conditioning program, and you will fall back into the old you.
So how do you not? Because I feel like I even watched you at Runga. I saw you showing up differently. And there were, I'm a very visual person, kinesthetic person. And like I could visualize, I could feel people coming up to you and things coming up to you. Any event you're running, we've run events. I know the reality of the back end of that. Stuff happens. Stuff happens that's not ideal, and it knocks you off your center. You get knocked off, you were right back. You were Joseph Anew. So how do people condition themselves? How do we strengthen that muscle so that we stay courageous in those moments?
Cold plunges.
Yes. That'll shock you.
Yeah. Well, there's this, I think, and it's kind of, and thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Did you feel it? Did you feel that happening?
Oh, it was, I mean, and here's the thing, right? It's when you start to, as you said, like when you start to see the world as doing things for you, well, why is my friend mad at me? If this is ultimately my doing, and in some way it's for me, what am I supposed to learn here? And so, at Runga, I had a really weird thing where suddenly a friend of mine that like we're so close, and like I love the guy, like we were like at odds, like kind of all of a sudden. And so like, yeah, like that'll make you stumble.
Yeah.
And you have to like commit to seeing what the hell is going on here. And the next day we were hugging, and when the event ended, the next day we were at lunch together talking it all out, and like, what did you see? What did I see? What did you see? What did I see? What did I feel? What did you feel? So there's this, like, when you get knocked off your rocker, it's okay, but you gotta like not take it personally, I guess. Like there's a kind of reason and a story behind everything, and like every story is a sort of Y in the road, a fork in the road, where like you have a choice. And like when you know that it's hard to change your conditioning, but you want to be a great dad, or this relationship is more important than the way I feel right now. Like it's talk about courage. It's like step into that.
Yeah. I was just going to say that. I mean, it sounds like in those moments, what you're doing too is you're reframing, you're making a choice. I could either completely let this slide, or I could be courageous. I could look at, why is this happening in this way? And then you're having those conversations. And I think that's also very clarifying in the kinds of relationships that I know you're continuing to create in your life. If you can't have those conversations, then there's something that's not there in that relationship.
And what's so funny, Melissa, is tough conversations have never been my thing. And since I began this journey, I have to have them like all the time. So
and what do you find from doing it? Like, is it changing things for you? Is it worth it?
It's worth it. It's and again, I'm a work in progress. We all are. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. If I shared one thing, or if I leave people with one thing, there's kind of two ways to look at it. I guess in my sort of like mountain climbing Spartan-y vibe, like when you get to the top of the mountain, there's another top of the mountain, right? Like everyone's got to that point. Like if you're hiking and you're like, oh, the summit's right here, like we're going to be there in 2 seconds, and you get there and it's like another like 500 feet or something. And so there's like the false summit problem where like, oh shit, great, I'm done. And then you find another layer of programming and another. And so I guess like understanding that life is very much a merry-go-round. And what I liked about another way that it was communicated to me, especially as you're changing, evolving, changing programming, or stepping beyond trauma. And I don't really like to use the word ascending, but sort of, I guess that's what it is. So like when you're sort of like on the up and up, and you're, connecting with your higher self, like let's say you have a trauma that's like right here, and you're like living, and it's like, as you start to go up, the trauma follows you. And that has been the craziest thing to me, is like, you think you're beyond it. You think you're like out of the woods, and you don't believe that anymore, and that's not alive for you anymore. And then you like come back around. But when you step into it, you're like, oh, now I have to process the trauma as the lone wolf. Now I have to process the trauma as the husband. Now I have to process the trauma as the father. And it's like this, like, so this, like, the journey is never really over. And but it's a hell of a ride, I guess. So
Yeah. And for people who are maybe just dabbling their foot into these kinds of phrases and conversations,
yeah.
trauma work and, personal growth and reinventing ourselves, when you say those things, like what comes up for me, and I'm curious what comes up for you, but like those traumas for me that would show up would be, I'm not good enough.
Mhm.
Right. So like, I'm not good enough shows up as a mother in that, of course, I lost my cool with my kids. And then it can show up as a wife, like, why am I not cooking the perfect meals and ready for my husband when he comes home? Like, of course I let work come first. So, like a common
Yeah.
pattern conditioning
Mhm.
from trauma would be, I'm not good enough.
Right.
Right. So
Yes.
like,
Yes.
what's one
Yeah.
for you that shows up as a father, as a husband?
Yeah. I got to pick carefully because I don't want to.
No, you don't.
I got so many to pick from, but um, so there's always worthiness for me, like brokenness.
Mm,
Like I am broken.
mm.
So like as an example, like my physical body at Runga, like I was feeling really good. And honestly, after Runga, I had a little like, what the heck? Like I feel it. No, like I thought I
Well,
shed this.
I mean, you put on the amount of work behind that event. I don't know how anyone wouldn't feel broken
Right.
afterwards.
Right. But there's an example of like, when we decide, especially in trauma and programming work, like when we feel good, we think we're never going to go back.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yep.
And that's where that upward spiral comes in, is like, because you could go to a Tony Robbins event or Runga or whatever.
Hmm.
And again, like, you're going to change. When I did the Joe Dispenza thing, I was meditating like 2 hours a day for the next like 2.5, 3 weeks straight.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Hmm.
5 a.m. club was a breeze.
Hmm.
And then I missed a day.
Hmm.
And then I said 30 minutes is enough today.
Hmm.
And it was a necessary calibration we can talk about, but I think like the judgment that comes in when you fall off the wagon, or we have to remember that like this is a journey and it's not going to be perfect, but it's sort of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is the way of the world.
Yeah.
And realizing that every time you go through it, seemingly from my experience, like there's a different lesson or a different layer to shed or
Yeah. It's like
become
when you
whole
read a
from.
book, if you read a book twice, it's a different book the second time around. And then I gave a word to my experiences. I call it reentry. So like if I go to a
Mm.
conference, I go to an event, I'm so fortunate that I've chosen a field that I feel like this is part of our culture. You go to workshops, you go to events, and I really hope that becomes more mainstream where people go to events. And I think you
Mm.
guys are going to create something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and you go, or whether it's a Tony Robbins and you're immersed and you're like, I'm going to change my life. Like I'm going to do all these things. And then boom, reentry. So
Mm-hmm.
like often in my mind, the plane ride home, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get slammed. I'm going to get slammed with 3 kids who missed me. They probably have some needs. The house is probably a mess. I didn't get groceries, like all the things. It's reentry.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's just reentry. Like I'll get through. But I have found the more times I go to these things, it's like you said, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, I'm strengthening the muscle. I have tools that then even if I get knocked on my butt when I come home, it's like, okay, if I can pick one thing from that event that I want to incorporate, if I can pick from last Runga, all right, I'm going to incorporate cold into my life, whether it's a cold shower or an ice bath, like whatever I can do to make it easy, I'm going to take that one thing. And if I fall back, it's okay. I know how to get back up.
And knowing too, and like maybe cold is a great example. And then I want to mention just the people that come to Runga.
Mm-hmm.
So like today, I had a really great morning, and I know you're into methylene blue, so I'll share my morning routine today. I got up, and I actually this is actually I think this protocol works. So I get up, I took methylene blue. I do like 70 milligrams. uh I waited. I actually like went and sipped coffee, and usually I would have a whole bunch of more things to do before coffee. You got to get your own engine running, but
Yeah.
I've got a jam-packed day today.
Mm-hmm.
So I take the methylene blue, I sip coffee. I only have a little bit just to kind of like wake up a little bit. And then I go in, I have a red light sauna. So, I'm sorry. So I had a few sips of coffee, and then I mixed up this beet powder I like, which is Beet Elite.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Beet Elite is like whatever they're doing to the beets. Like, I don't know if they're organic or anything, but like it is a way better blood flow promoter than like your average beet powder, probably GMO or something. But anyway, it really like it really
Those
like,
pesticides really drive it home.
but from an athletic performance, and we can get into health versus fitness, right? Because
Yeah.
from an athletic performance standpoint, like you want what promotes the change, as long as it's, there's still just beets on the ingredients. So anyway, so I take the beet elite, and there's something between like methylene blue and beet elite because the blood flow from the beet elite, and then I went into the HBOT, excuse me, not the HBOT. Today I alternate sauna and HBOT, by the way. Today I did the red light sauna, and that like lights up the methylene blue.
Yeah.
And just like I felt like on fire. And then I came down to do the cold plunge, and my nervous system was like, you've done like 3 to 5 minutes the last like week in a row. Like you feel awesome, but like it's not the day for cold.
You listened.
I sort of listened. I got in, dunked my head, and got right out. So I didn't sit there at all. I just accepted that today was like a quick hitter, like just a in and out. And I think that's an interesting lesson in terms of conditioning and staying on the horse. It's like in my Joe Dispenza example, when I set the standard of like 5 a.m. to 7, I'm going to meditate upstairs, and then I miss a day. Well, the 10-minute day is actually an important part of conditioning. Right. So the 10-minute day, what did I do? I still got my ass upstairs. I still like got into the thing. I still did the thing.
Right.
And so there's this like conditioning aspect that requires that we like step into it to maintain the habit, and then like, but not to judge the outcome or the, whatever metric we're using to quantify or qualify how good it was. And now, Melissa, the other thing too, and another way to put this would be the 3 people that come to Runga, and basically half the people that come through, it's not perfect math, but we'll say half the people that come through, I call them like pain relief. They've got like a gut thing. They've got a trauma thing. They've got a belief thing, a pain thing, what metabolic thing, whatever it is. So we've got like half the people that come in, they might look amazing, but they've got a thing.
Yeah.
And they're here for some pain relief. And then we have this huge number of people now that come back to us. Everyone thinks it's like a bucket list thing they're going to do once, and then they're literally back 6 months later.
There's a lot of repeats.
There's a lot of repeats.
I love it.
And there's that like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So like the next group beyond pain relief are what I call the belongers. So there's these people that like, they think they're a little crazy because everyone's telling them they're crazy because they got a cold plunge in their garage now, or they bought an HBOT, or they like take this like weird blue teeth dye every morning, whatever it is. So they're feeling a little like alienated by what's going on, and they need to belong. They need permission to keep going and to go deeper. And so there's this trickling up. So someone that comes through in an October event and they're back in the spring event, they might have ascended from pain relief to belonging. And then the next group, I call them the becomers. Like they work in big pharma still, and they're tired of it, and they want to like start a business in the health space.
There were a lot of those.
They want to find someone to invest in. They want to like, they want to like do something grander than themselves. And so like the ideal scenario would be like someone comes through for pain relief. We see them again a year later for belonging, and then another year or 2 later for becoming. But it's okay if a becomer comes in as a pain relief. Like we get a lot of people that they had a recent trauma, a death in the family, spousal issues, whatever. So it's okay too to like be a belonger and come back as a pain reliever the next time. And it's all good. So kind of another way to look at it.
We show up so differently in different phases of our lives. And then, I wonder like for some of the people listening to this who maybe don't so far come to events like we're talking about, and they're like, I want to start to do this, and I will be the crazy one in my circle. Maybe you're meant to be the leader. Maybe you're meant to not tell anyone, just let them see how you change. And when people ask you what you're doing differently, maybe you're meant to help lead your circle. Who knows? Like this, again, this stuff works. And I love it because it's hitting the mainstream. People are talking about it everywhere. People are getting curious. And then I feel like what was really cool with one of the panels at this recent Runga is they were talking about, I think it was Ben Greenfield was like, people hear, okay, I got to incorporate breath work. Well, how much? And I got to do cold plunge. Well, how long and how often? And I need to do sauna. And how do I do that? And red light, like, where do I start? And he simplified it. He's like, get some red light sometimes. Watch a sunset. Watch a sunrise. Get some cold in your life sometimes. Throw on the cold shower for 10 seconds when you're done. Focus on your breath sometimes. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
stoplight. Maybe you're just tuning into it. Like, you don't have to have thousands of dollars and all this time and work from home and be able to get in these tools. You can do it now, and you can do it for free, and you can just start. And I think, just to kind of wrap this up, you know, it's a lot about doing things in your life that help you get present and
Mhm.
help you listen, because your body will tell you. And when you listen, your body will guide you into using and incorporating some of these tools that are already accessible all around you.
Absolutely. And like I'm envisioning, and it's a little bit, I've joked about like my fitness career and my like, because I've been doing this for like 20 years. And there's this like, how come I'm doing stuff now that looks a lot like what I did when I was 19 and had none of the insight, none of the knowledge, none of the experience?
Mm.
So like one thing to remember in the mainstream, if you're just getting started and we sound crazy and you're just but you're in and you're curious where to begin, is like wherever you begin, remember this is like a bell curve. And it's like year one, year two of your journey where you actually reach max insanity.
Mm.
And year year five, it starts to look a lot like your minute one. It starts to look way more like minute one, year one, month
Yeah.
two, but you went through the damn cycle of insanity and experience
Yeah.
and all of this. And so in the end, like in the beginning, it looks like this and it looks like that because you don't know what to do. And then like 5 years later, it looks a lot like that because you're doing it intuitively.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
remember one of the things you first told me is, you're like, these people, I'm one of them, right? So I have like my sleep tracker. I like to measure my HRV. You were like, I tell my clients, just ditch the stuff,
yeah,
like stop measuring. And so, as people, I think my listeners are very new to a lot of this kind of stuff. And those are the people I really want to speak to. We can get all the trackers and get really obsessed with the numbers and measuring. And like you said, go all in and be really left brain about it. But then we balance it out by just letting our body, our heart, and our mind be the guide. You're going to feel good when you're doing it in the way that you need to do.
absolutely. And the Aura Ring is like a high-tech tarot card.
Yeah.
It's like, you wake up and you like feel great, but then you pull like the which of I don't really know my tarot cards that
Yeah.
well, but
Yeah.
like you pull
Yeah.
a card that says like,
You
you're supposed to
slept.
feel crappy. You slept poorly, you got no REM, and then you're like,
Yeah.
like, now I'm gonna have to live my life the way that my Aura Ring told me to live, which is tired, not ready to exercise, and all of
Right.
this.
Yeah.
I think that, if you are just beginning, that like some of the tech quantification, when it's gamified, can kind of keep you like, competing with other people. Or like I used to love that with like
Mhm.
Fitbit, back in the
Yeah.
day, is like I can see Melissa's steps, I can see my steps.
Yeah.
So there's some gamification, but like remember, don't take yourself or any of it too seriously. And
Absolutely. I think, like, what I love about Aura is it'll show me, okay, heart rate variability. How does my body respond to stress? I did a sauna today, major impact. I did a
mm,
cold plunge, not so good. But usually that will happen because my body was telling me today's not a cold plunge day, and I got in anyway. So I think it's neat at the beginning. You start to see like what tools move the needle, because then
mm,
if you fall hard or you have a really stressful week and you're just not feeling great, what's the one thing I can do right now? You'll typically start to have a good guide of like, what is it that works for my brain? In your case, hyperbarics, healing the brain trauma. But then from there, ditch it and just listen, because your body will tell you.
absolutely. And this podcast is going to be 6 hours long, but the
We should wrap
well,
up.
it's funny because, and I know we probably got to tie up here, but it's funny because even Aura and all the other ones, like a lot of times, like you should prove Runga. You should put everyone, put an
Oh,
Aura
I see what you're
ring
saying. Yeah.
on everyone, and like after the 3 days, like look at it and like you'll prove that it works.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, it won't prove that it works because it'll actually say that it doesn't work,
Mm.
because you take somebody who, has never done a cold plunge and they do 9 minutes in a weekend. They do 3 3-minute cold plunges. Like Monday morning, their HRV is going to be blasted. They just did like 100 kettlebell swings a day, a cold plunge, did all sorts of meditation, all sorts of heart opening and mindfulness, which should help.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a super compensation effect.
Yes.
So if you jumped in the cold plunge and you saw like the next day a hit on your Aura ring, but the next day might be the impact of the cold plunge.
Right. But if you take all
Right.
that aside and you just look at people that attend, I mean, you can see their energy like right there. There's proof it works.
There's exactly. It's but I think there's like, we're eating well today to feel great next week, not necessarily
Yeah,
tomorrow. There's
that's true.
this like,
Investment.
this there's this time and people look for instant gratification on some of this stuff and they might actually be running from results because the results are just like delayed and
Yeah,
the expectation of benefit is immediate. So
such a good point. All right, Joseph, I feel like we do need to wrap this up. I know there will be a part 2 with you, and maybe people will comment below, like, what do they want to hear more of? We'll hop on again. Can't wait to get Amelia on here as well. People can find you on your Intuitive Warrior podcast. We'll put all the notes below for Runga Life. I know everyone's going to want to check that out. So any parting words, Joseph?
No, I hope this was helpful for people. And major congrats, Melissa. I love seeing you kind of step into this amazing, inspired mama here. And I think you're going to do a lot of good in the world. And it's so wonderful to see. It's like, I'm really digging like all the content and I just want to like wish you all the best. And I know you're going to be just amazing and change lives. And yeah, I just can't wait to kind of be a witness of that. So thank you for doing this and investing your time in this way. And then parting words would be like, I do hope this was valuable. And I think I gave a lot of like ground level stuff for people to work with, but yeah, welcome on the journey. And, if Runga or myself, you can find me online and through my podcast. And if I can ever be of any service to anybody listening, of course, just like, let me know and we'll do it. So,
and you'll have the best workout of your life if you ever work out with Joseph. Best workout, hands down. Incredible. Incredible.
Well, thank you, Melissa. You're biased.
No, it's good. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. I love you. I love Amelia. I'm just so excited to be on this journey with you guys. Mwah.
I look forward to the Melissa and Amelia episode. That's going to be a good one.
That was incredible. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. He is such a wealth of information, and I also just love how vulnerable and open he is. It's people sharing stories like his that really inspire me to make transformative changes in my life, and I hope you experience that too. And I really hope that you walk away with some tangible steps that you can take as far as making transformations in your life. If you enjoyed this video, and I hope you did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and most importantly, share it with someone else in your life that can benefit from this content. Thank you. Joseph is a health, nutrition, and transformative coach. Nope. And is bleh. I hope you enjoyed that time with Joseph as much as I did. Go ahead and I find he brain dead. It's people sharing stories like his that really inspire me to God, sorry, Nick. Brutal.